So without further ado, to talk with us and really have a conversation about rhythm section playing tonight, I want to do just a real brief introduction of these wonderful musicians. The first, pianist Helen Sung, who has performed with Clark Terry, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, Terry Lynn Carrington, Wynton Marsalis, Regina Carter, and Cecile McLaurin Salvant, among many others, of course. As an educator, she served on the faculties of Brooklyn Queens Conservatory of Music, the Newark Boys Chorus School, and on the jazz faculties at the Berklee College of Music, Juilliard School, and Columbia University. Welcome, Helen. Thanks for being with us tonight. Our second panelist, the wonderful drummer Jerome Jennings. He has performed, toured, and recorded with such legendary musicians as Sonny Rollins, Hank Jones, Gerald Wilson, Christian McBride, Ron Carter, Dee Dee Bridgewater, Wynton Marsalis, the Count Basie Orchestra, and countless others. He's also served as an artist in residence and lectured at such universities as UNC Greensboro, the Peabody Institute, Rutgers, the Juilliard School, the Jazz Music Institute in Brisbane, getting international on us, and Sydney Conservatory of Music, among many others. Please welcome Jerome Jennings. So I know they're anxious to really, I think we're going to have this very conversational. So like I said, please leave any questions with us and we'll get them to them. And I think they have a lot of things they want to both share and ask each other, it sounds like, from our conversation a minute ago. So I will get out of the way and let you folks get to it.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
So
Hey,
Jerome,
Helen.
oh, hello. It's so nice to see you, and I'm excited to have some time to just talk about being in the rhythm section and just learn from you and pick your brain about a few things.
Yes, and it's the same for me. I'm glad to be here with you. I'm a fan, so I've got some questions for you as well. But can I start off?
Of course.
Okay, so when you think of a rhythm section, right, in any type of group, any situation, what analogy could you use, like to describe the rhythm section as is to the band? Because I got a few of those, but I want to know, like, how do you see it? You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I sometimes half jokingly say if I didn't play the piano, I would want to play the bass or the drums because I think the rhythm section players are the most awesome. But I guess I would say it's like the heart of the band. It's like the engine. It creates uh, the stage for the music. You know, the bass gives you the harmonic foundation, the drums, the rhythmic groove, and the piano is filling in. You know, the piano is a very unique instrument. It's technically a percussion instrument, but it can also play beautifully legato. It can play chords, you know, simultaneously more than, you know, as many fingers as you have. I only have 10. So just, yeah. So I would say we set the stage and we are kind of always in the background in some way. You know, like if you notice a rhythm section, I would say that's probably not a good thing. But I would love to hear some of your analogies.
No, you know what? I agree 100% with that. Like when it's like if you're driving a car and you can feel the tires, there's something wrong with the tires. You know what I mean? Like if you're driving and you're feeling like you probably have something, like you have a flat tire, right? So you don't want to think about what you don't want to think about the tires of the car or the engine. If the engine is shaking, you're thinking about the engine. You don't want to think about it. And you know, we hear like the rhythm section is the engine to the band, and you know, I firmly believe that if you have a terrible rhythm section, not just a good drummer, not just a good piano player, not just a good bass player, I think you're in good shape. You know?
Yes, and that's something that was so I think it's something I'll be learning about for the rest of my career, but it was a huge mind shift coming from the classical world where I had experience playing in orchestras and chamber groups, but it's a totally different approach than playing with a jazz band. And what I mean by that, um, because jazz is so unique in that the music is made there on the stage, really in many ways. It's a it's a different type of aesthetic, different type of experience. You know, I remember in classical music performances, I would be going over the music in my mind and remembering, okay, that's a tough technical part, and okay, watch that part, it's a little tricky, but you know, those are the places that if this and this and this happens, then that means it's a successful performance. But coming to the jazz stage, it's like you can't. I discovered I couldn't think like that. I had to um, really surrender to the moment. And it sounds good, but it's really hard to do. It was really hard for me to do because you're engaging with musicians who don't hear the same way you do, who don't feel music the same way you do, and then coming together trying to make something groove and work together. I mean, I'd love to, like, what was your experience with getting into jazz and realizing your role in a rhythm section?
Well, well, I mean, that I want to ask you how your transition was after I answer this question from the classical world into the jazz world. You seem to have made it seamlessly, but I would like to know what were some challenges. But
Yeah.
for me, it started from playing in the basement with friends, and when you learn about your function by people telling you what they don't want you to do, or you know what I mean, or like you start listening very closely to recordings, and you say, well, you start to listen with a more mature ear, right, as opposed to listening for that drum feel or listening for that bass, those crazy chromatic bass runs and jumps. Now you're listening for what is creating this thing called groove, right? When people think of like Jaco Pastorius, a lot of people think of his virtuosity, but to hear him just lay a groove down, like you know what I'm saying, Black Market, or you listening to something like you hear that, or you know, I at first got deeply into more fusion music and CTI. The first straight ahead jazz person I listened to was Art Blakey. And
Wow.
that was absolutely amazing. And we're gonna play some of that music as eventually, you know, at some point we're gonna get to it. But I I am interested, Helen. I meet students, and I work with students who are in that classical world and are making that transition into playing in a rhythm section, playing piano, playing guitar, percussionist. What how was that transition for you? What were some shocking moments? What were like epiphanies that you had?
Well, I'm not sure. I can't see the participants in today's webinar. I assume there are some students out there. I just think one thing to always keep in mind is this kind of stuff takes time. And I personally think that um, uh, we've heard often how people say jazz, it's a language. And it's true. It totally is true. And I don't know that one can really teach somebody else how to speak a language in the same way that I don't know that you and we can say what principles, what tools might have helped us, but there's something about this music in its improvisational nature, the nature of it being a language with its set of conventions and principles that each person has to make that leap themselves. I don't know if that makes sense. Because when I first started playing this music, okay, first the whole big thing was like, oh my God, how do you play music without notes? So my whole focus was on soloing. How can I play a good solo? How do you improvise over this set of chord changes? But then I realized at some point when I was at the Monk Institute, that being a good comper, thus good member of the rhythm section, is even more important than playing a killing solo, especially if you want to work. That's something that
Yes,
all said.
yes.
So then you think, okay, comping, because Clark Terry gave me one of my biggest, butt kickings on stage ever. I think we should tell the story since we are Jazz St. Louis, right?
Yes.
So he was the first teacher at the Monk Institute when I was there, and as you guys all probably know, wherever he plays, the last set of the week or however long he's at a club, he opens it up to be a jam session for the musicians to come and play. And so he said, "Why don't y'all come down to the club?" It's Scullers in Boston, and sit in, play a couple of tunes. And we're like, okay. And I'm like, oh no, because I'm still really brand new to jazz. I'd only been playing about 2 years, and so we went and we played a tune. I think we started with a blues, and it was fun. And he was like, "What should we play next?" And I opened my big mouth and I suggested the tune that he had been working on with us that day, Bye Bye Blackbird. So we're playing, and I'm like, yeah, oh my God, I can't believe I'm playing on stage with Clark at Scullers. And then I noticed, because Clark liked to sit on that high stool, I hear him yelling, "Where's Don?" Don Friedman is his regular pianist. "Go get Dawn. She's playing the wrong changes."
Oh no.
So I was like, "What?" I'm like, "I thought I was in the right place," and it was like, Jerome. It's I can laugh about it now because then Dawn came up on stage, and I didn't consciously decide to do this, but I remember I just wouldn't get up. I just kept playing. So it was so awkward because he stood there next to me for the whole rest of the song. And then afterwards, I just was, of course, I wanted to sink into the ground and disappear and never be seen from again. But I was thinking, what did I do wrong? Because I did not get lost in the form. But what I realized later is, that second part of Bye Bye Blackbird, it's like it's not A, it's kind of A-B, it's like, this part.
Yes.
So my comping chords were not really together, and that generation, they want to hear certain chords, that part. I was probably playing something like.
Okay. You're opening it up. Okay, I hear you.
That's part of comping, like what is appropriate for that moment. Who are you playing for? Who are you comping for? And so that was a very painful lesson, but I'm happy to report, like 3 or 4 years after I graduated, Clark asked me to sub for Don at a gig, and we played at the concert hall in Yale, at Yale University, and he called Bye Bye Blackbird. I'm like, I'm ready for you.
There you go. There you go. Refuge.
So there's like this whole world of comping language and knowing what's appropriate, but then even more important than that is grooving, like comping in the groove, like creating, being part of this groove. And that somebody said to me, you have to know, and then of course you're playing for the soloist, right? And being sensitive to what they're playing and what are they going after in their solos. So somebody said to me, you have to learn how to listen and play at the same time. So those were some huge lessons for me, because it's like, you're not just listening to the soloist, you're listening to the bassist, you're listening to the drummer, and how do you create a cohesive, like a stage, like I said at the beginning, a stage that suits the moment and suits the music.
Yeah, but that's an amazing story. I think, hey, to be honest, I think it would be nice if we could listen to a tune right now.
Okay.
What do you think?
Did you want to suggest something, or I could suggest something?
I mean, you mentioned Bye Bye Blackbird. I was thinking Miles. Maybe Bye Bye Blackbird, because we have, and I'm sorry, Andy. That's like, we gave Andy a list, but now we're like kind of improvising here. I think we can hear the rhythm section go between two and swing and do it seamless, and we can get a chance to hear how that classic rhythm section with Miles is handling business.
Great suggestion. Awesome suggestion. That was perfect, Jerome. Just what the
All
doctor
right.
ordered.
Well, you brought up by Blackbird. I figured, hey, let's listen to it and see what makes it so good. What makes that so good? Like the rhythm section of Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones, and Rick Garland.
I was struck by just how much space there was. Just so much spaciousness. But everything that they played was intentional and necessary. Like it's like eloquence, not a wasted word.
So eloquent, and I noticed they were getting so much information from the horns
Mm,
in terms of which way to move next. Like I noticed it in second chorus. I don't know if our audience noticed, but Train he hinted to like a double time thing, like double time in his soloing, and Philly kind of picked up on the second chorus, kind of hinted to a double time, and it came from Train. It's like they're just playing off of each other so well.
I
You
also
know?
noticed that um, Red Garland played a different alternate set of changes that had a little chromatic movement, and Train was just on it right away. I was like, whoa! And that became part of his solo too, just at that part in the form, it's 2-5-2-5, like chromatic movement. And to me, that's just like it's part of the journey that the song took you on, right? Like the way I mean, I was listening to Philly Joe's snare with great interest.
Yes.
I did want to ask you about that because when I was in class, it would be like, okay, well, the drummer he's commenting too with his snare, and what is your approach with that? And are you listening to what the pianist is playing too? Does that affect what you play? Like I would think that we could probably get in each other's way too.
Absolutely.
Like what is your concept?
Okay. It's okay. So this is basically a language, right? So we have to articulate using the language that's been given to us, that's been handed down. It has to be some type of. It's going to be some type of example of that, done your way. But there's a language, and it's like having a conversation,
Mm.
right? So let's you know what I want to do? We're gonna do an experiment here. I'm gonna address this how I comp when I'm gonna ask you to speak with me about whatever. If you can just talk about anything at length,
Okay.
and I'm gonna show you how this conversation can work, and think of me as a snare drum while you're
Okay,
talking.
I'm gonna teach you a new tune,
Yes,
Jerome.
right
Okay.
on.
So there's this show streaming on Disney Plus right now called WandaVision.
Mm,
I am so into. I'm really sad. I think the series finale is coming up this end of this week.
is that right?
9 episodes,
Right on.
and it's about two heroes from the Marvel
Two
universe.
two
Wanda
here.
Wanda Maximoff. I'm embarrassed. I know her last name.
One one the maximum. Really?
And a hero made of vibranium called Vision.
Is that
And
right?
WandaVision, like kind of cutesy because they
Yeah.
reference like classic TV styles from black and white up to present
Mm,
day in each episode. It's pretty. I want to work with these people. They're so
yeah.
creative.
Right on. You see how I'm interjecting without changing your flow of what you're trying to say.
Yes.
But at one point, you picked up on something I said, and you just you almost you like, I don't know, you built on what I said, but still kept your flow, and you made an exclamation point of what I said, and then you moved back to your point. Now, I can't do those interjections too loud or too bombastic, because it's not a pleasant conversation if I do that. And we all know people, all of you who are listening here, you all know people who are bombastic in their conversation or will not let you get a word in. That's how you don't want your snare to sound. unless the band leader says, I want a lot of information coming at me with your left hand. Some people, Freddie Hubbard told, Victor Lewis told me, the great drummer and composer Victor Lewis told me that Freddie Hubbard said, I need a lot of information coming from your left hand. He wants a lot of information, right? But it's a conversation, you know, and you have to pick and choose your spots where you can interject your yep, right on.
Tell me more.
I hear you. Exactly.
Well, that's brilliant, Jerome. But then what do you do when there's somebody else kind of doing the same thing, like the pianist? Like, how would they fit into that picture? Because I guess
Yes.
one-on-one, but I guess it's kind of the same when three people have a conversation, kind of.
The more people who are in the conversation, you have to pass the microphone around, the proverbial microphone, right? You got to pass it around. If we're playing cards and everybody gets a chance to say something, and everybody can't talk at the same time. And sometimes, Helen, you're gonna start talking when another person is gonna start talking. But somebody has to go, say what you have to say, and then I'll, you know. But in the meantime, even while you're talking, I'm going, yeah. Oh, I heard that, and I'm going to follow that, or I'm going to compliment that. We're accompanying instruments. That's what we do. We're accompanying instruments, especially the drums. I mean, when we're dealing with a piano trio, especially the drums and bass. When we're dealing with horns, you know, we gotta accompany the horns as a section, you know. So that's how I approach comping on my snare. Sometimes you might play a little too much, or you might play too little. You rarely play too little, because that ride cymbal pat beat and your hi-hat, you're and feathering your bass drum, you're always going to be playing. So you don't. This is the art of playing drums, like jazz drums. You're always going to be playing. There's always going to be that undercurrent of groove. The left hand is in right foot, and sometimes you can comp with your left foot too. I do that too. You have to use your taste. It has to be tasteful. You have to play in balance, and it has to be relevant to what's going on around you. You can't just do things because you can do it. Sometimes you got to play stuff that feels easy, and you have to be okay with things that feel easy. You know, that feels easy to your limbs, right? And sometimes that's just what the doctor ordered. That's what the band needs.
I love that. I'm going to be thinking about that. That's awesome. Well, why don't we hear something by Freddie Hubbard?
Sure.
This is from his landmark album, Hub Tones, and the standard, You're My Everything. This is, I think, some of the most brilliant comping. I think Herbie Hancock is like, he brings the best of that world of Wynton Kelly and Red Garland, with all this soulful earthiness and the blues and the groove, with the nuance and incredible melodic inventiveness. Like, I played this track for my student the other day, and I asked her to describe it, and she said his comping sounds like it could be a whole different melody. And I think it's just fabulous. So
Well, that was a great selection.
woo, Freddie Hubbard, James Spalding, Herbie
That's
Hancock,
right.
Reggie Workman, and Clifford Jarvis on the drums.
That's right.
So I personally think the drums are the most powerful instrument in any band. And I don't mean necessarily loud, like it really, you can turn the world around that on its axis. And I love how he did that, like creating texture, like when he made a real drive for the last part of the head, like that was amazing.
Yeah.
And the way he hit the snare to start someone's solo, or
Yeah.
but I want to hear your take on that.
No, I mean, well, the thing is, you know, Clifford Jarvis, when he brought in Freddie coming out of the head, going into the solos, it wasn't anything grandiose. He didn't do anything that was epic. It was 1, 2, a 1. It was doody doody do, doody doody do, doom doom doom, bam. That's all he played. doom, do doom, bam, 2, 3. Like, it doesn't have to be over the top all the time, or rarely does it have to be. Like you said, I mean, the whole point is to work with people, right? Um, and the things that allow you to work with people aren't soloing, really, drumming wise. Uh, I mean, that's an additive, but they want to feel good. They want things to feel the way that they want them. Uh, they want things to feel. Now, what I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay.
When piano players, and Herbie was doing this too. Herbie was doing this. I heard Red Garland, but when people are soloing, when the soloist is playing and the pianist is comping short and long chords, articulations. How do you know when to do that, or is it a personal choice?
It's both. Like you said about the snare, commenting that it comes from a lineage of tradition, vocabulary. It's the same with short and long. I think jazz phrasing has some principles to it, and I think it really comes from horn phrasing, like when you hear two notes, like 2/8 notes, it's usually long, short, right? Sometimes, but mainly just like, and I think maybe that, the Charleston rhythm,
Mm.
Charles, it'd be different if you get Charleston, like, so that short note with the syncopation, I think when it's syncopated, it's usually short, like, because otherwise, if you hold it, the note, the shortness gives that energy, that push to the note. Um, but then the setting is important too, like in a ballad, I probably wouldn't be comping like that.
Mm.
So, but, and also tempo is important because, especially when you're playing super fast, sometimes, if the soloist is playing a flurry of notes, sometimes it's just, you don't want to cover them. Sometimes you can be the launching pad, but other times you can be the, the tish, or what do you call it? The atmosphere behind them too. So I thought maybe can we talk about some like real practical things? Like what were some practical things that helped you get better at comping? Because I know one thing that really helped me was, believe it or not, it's not very glamorous, I'm sorry, is just transcribing comping. Like people like I remember I transcribed Bud Powell, Monk, Wynton Kelly, Herbie, Bobby Timmons, Hank Jones, like just first to get rhythmic language, because I think, aside from articulation is part of it, but that rhythmic language is so important because, as you know, like if you play the right notes in the wrong rhythm, that sounds worse than wrong notes in the right rhythm because, rhythm is king. And so I would actually, if there was a passage of something, if they did a phrase like, but do da be dee da, something like that, I would write down what they did and then learn it in all 12 keys and try to, whatever tune that was, I would practice that lick. This is not for soloing, this is for comping, which I wish I'd done more of
Yes.
earlier. Practicing it everywhere in the piece that it could fit. So it didn't sound good, but I was trying to refine that lick, like, and then trying it in different pieces, different places and different pieces, and until it became part of my language. And then just I asked Mulgrew Miller once, how do you practice comping? He said, just comp. He said he set the metronome and just be comping, to the metronome. And that's something I did. I mean, just I think one thing that I had to really make peace with is like when you practice, you really shouldn't sound that great because that means, you're not working on something that, so then also, I did this, I had my class at Juilliard, I did this one time. Let's transcribe a whole piece, like it was our Blakey tune, Sweet and Sour.
Yeah.
Way shorter tune, but our Blakey performance. And let's just see what they're doing. Let's experience what that might have been like. But it's more just to, because you know, we stand, like Jimmy Heath said, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? It's just like um, those are starting points for you, but those are solid because they all said, from Jimmy Heath to Clark Terry to Herbie Hancock to Wayne Shore, they're like, at the Monk Institute, they said, you know, we want you to know the tradition and learn the tradition, but we also want you to move the music forward. So, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean that's fantastic, Helen. I think when we're talking about comping and you're talking about and I'm gonna go for in the drummer's point of view, at least my point of view coming up, I would listen to a chorus and I would check out every drummer has I learned this at Rutgers from the great Ralph Peterson, who just passed 2 days ago. Every drummer has a certain clave that they do, something that they do, right? And that they've kind of fall into, and it works. And Art Blakey, he has this thing where he goes 1 2 1 2 3 4 2 3 4 1 2 right? And it's kind of like a take on the Charleston rhythm, right? It's just on different sides of the beat. And when Ralph Peterson opened that up to me, and I started to listen to drummers comp much differently than I had before, and it just opened up. But the thing is, you've got to have that, what I like to call forward motion. Drummers have to have that forward motion when they're playing. Can we play something? Let's play Alamode from Art Blakey and on Impulse. And I want everybody to just listen to how that ride cymbal is just driving the band, and the way Art Blakey, he's comping in between the phrases of the horn players, and that's a way that you have to comp. You have to hear the phrases and imagine when they're going to end, right? Check it out, Alamode. I got a secret to tell you, Helen. I can listen to Art Blakey play swing all day.
Me too. And that cross stick on 4, man, and his rolls and the stuff he has like during behind. I think that was a trumpet solo, or maybe Wayne solo. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We got a question. Maybe we got two.
I think we got a few questions, I believe.
Okay. Dale, so nice to see you. Dale hails from Vancouver and a great supporter of jazz music. So he writes a great question. So does that mean playing on top of the beat or behind the beat depends on the tempo of the tune?
Okay, so you never want to drag. First of all, I don't care if it's a ballad, if it's a up tempo, medium, you never want to drag. Okay. We all have tendencies. Sometimes things are going to speed up. Sometimes it's just going to happen. I mean, if you put a metronome on that last tune, which I've done, it sped up, but you couldn't tell because they were so together. It was beautiful. So when I say play on top of the beat, I mean that, but I also mean you have to swing like you like doing it. You and the bass player, you all have to be together. I mean, you have to be locked in. And that ride cymbal is so important in swing music, right? Modern swing music that after 19, I would say 32, 33, like we have to understand that the advent of what was called of bebop, that ride cymbal, it has to have personality, it has to swing, and it has to be in balance. And it's just so important to not drag and to not fight with the bass player. Remember, we want the wheels of the car to have a nice steady evenness. We don't want one of the wheels to be flatter than the other. So I hope that answers the question, Dale. Helen, if you want to jump in.
Um, totally. I also think conversely, you don't want to rush either. You
That's right.
know, although if you had to choose one, probably rushing's a little better. So it's rushing is always a lot of energy, right? But coming from the classical world, again, in my story, is the classical approach to rhythm is totally different. And my observation is that us classical players, we tend to play too much on top of the beat. And I didn't like that because when I recorded myself playing at gigs, I felt like it didn't swing. It didn't feel like it was in the groove. So I think all of us tend to feel music a little differently. Some of us put it a little bit in front of the beat. Some of us are right in the middle. Some of us are kind of on the back side. So that's has nothing to do with the tempo of a tune. That's just how we feel music. But then when you come together with people to play, you have to find a place where it grooves. And
That's
it's
right.
like a big compromise. But
Yes.
it's in the service of the music, right? Like I would say our Blakey plays almost on top of the beat. Would you say was it
Yes.
a normal thing? Like
Yes.
I felt like, woo, okay, he's like pushing them along there. And it was like
Absolutely.
one moment there was like a little bit, but like everybody responded, everybody they went with it. And that's again what I said at the beginning about playing with people in the moment together. Like I know really can't do that right now, but I think there's hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but just there's no substitute for playing with people, because then you experience playing with somebody who plays very differently than you or feels music very differently than you. Like for me, that's something that really helped me. Like I studied with Danilo Perez at the Monk Institute. Like he taught me this exercise. He said, the main subdivision of the beat in jazz is three, right? The triplet. But swing is in that magical place between two eighth notes and triplets, right? And he said people who rush tend to not feel the second part of the triplet enough. People who drag don't feel the third part of the triplet enough. So it's like I feel like I had to stretch my beat to make it fatter. P-H-A-T-T-E-R.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, we're all imperfect human beings playing together. So it's not necessarily got to be perfect time. It won't be perfect time because we're not perfect, but I think slowing down and or speeding up, they both have their implications to me. I think if someone's slowing down, to me it kind of represents a kind of unsureness, uh inebriation at times sometimes.
Oh,
I
Dor.
don't mean I'm just being real. I'm just being real. Or like kind of reeling it in, not really wanting to be there. Now, if you speeding up, sometimes that could just be either nervous energy or you're just very excited. Sometimes when drummers play loud or maybe too loud, at times it can just mean you're excited. You're excited to be here or you're nervous. So I don't necessarily. I mean, intent is everything. Intent is everything.
And
We
I
got
love
more.
what Oliver said. He said, "Can you explain how you go about negotiating the time fill with rhythm section players that might feel time differently than you?" Woo, that's a
Oh,
good question.
well, we kind of got to that. We was kind of talking about that just now.
Yeah, and I would say I would if I was playing with a drummer who feel again, this is all we're talking very fine shades, right? And it's not like you don't never want to be a jerk about anything. Like sometimes a drummer is dragging or a bass player is dragging. So I'll probably play more off beats to do the energy, right? Because that was one thing. Red Garland, he would emphasize the 1 and 3, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If somebody's rushing, I might play the other way, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's like kind of balancing. So it's not about. I discovered like one of my personal revelations. It's not about trying to fix the time. It's about trying to find a place where, because everybody, I assume when we're playing together, everybody wants to swing, everybody wants to groove. So it's just you want to find it. You have to find it together. It doesn't live or die by one person. You know, although I love this next question from Steve. Do you want to
Okay.
address that?
Do you think it's the drummer's job to control the time? And Roy Hargrove said that the it's the whole band's responsibility to defend the time. Absolutely. I like that, defend the time. Yeah. Um, we are all responsible for the time, but this is rhythms. This is a rhythm section um clinic right now. So workshop. So we have to be aware of what we're doing, and I'm going to piggyback off of what Helen just said in order to answer your question. We have to be aware of what specific things we do, what it does to the music, like upbeats. If I play a lot of upbeats with my left hand, it's gonna give the illusion that the time is moving faster. It's gonna give the illusion that I'm playing on top of the beat, even if I'm not. If I'm playing more downbeats, if in the band is rushing, there's downbeats can have a more implication of, trying to reel them back or play in the middle of the beat, right? So we have to know what we're doing. We have to understand what it is, the science behind what it is we're doing, and we actually have to play with the rhythm section, with the bass player. I mean, it's I don't think it's not the drummer's sole job. It's the rhythm section's job. I think it's the bass player and the drummer's job to find that medium, to find that sweet spot. If you all listen to a recording, there's a Finest Newborn recording called Harlem Blues with Ray Brown and Elvin Jones. It's an interesting hook. It works to me. But Ray Brown, he plays on top of the beat, but it works. It's a constant.
Negotiation.
It's a constant negotiate. It's constant, but it works. So yeah, it's not solely the drummer's job, but we do have to we have to be aware of where the time is and what's happening on the bandstand at all times. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well, we got some people with life in them. Natalie Song writes, I had played in a trio for a while and we practiced and played together a lot. Whenever we got feedback, adjudicators always commented how tight grooving the drums and bass were. How can I, as a pianist, make sure I help the time and be a part of that? Well, I think I wouldn't take it that since they didn't mention you that they didn't feel like you weren't a part of it. I agree with Jerome. The bass and the drums really kind of are at the bass BASE level, in terms of, because bassists have the bass notes and drums are playing that ride cymbal. So I think more than you are a part of that. But I think, if we're talking like just raw materials of time and groove in the band, it is the bass and drums. And so I think you can be a part of that through, like we've been talking about, conversation with the snare and also the harmonic aspects, where the basses might be leading. Like, I still love that part. It's just some of these recordings I haven't heard in a while, but just how Coltrane heard something that Garland was doing with the harmonies and he just jumped right on it. So that kind of stuff, like the pianist kind of has to be, I feel like, everywhere. I can't think of which Marvel character that would be. Just kind of everywhere, there to support, there to highlight, and then just, I think, playing in the groove, in the time with them. However that, it's hard to say. It's just, this music happens in the moment, so it's hard to say, well, you do this and you do that. But maybe back to the point where we're talking about, like, if we notice you in the wrong way, then maybe we need to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Well, it's interesting, Helen, because when Red threw that out to Train picked up on it. Now, let's say he was just throwing out things left and right and didn't give Train or Miles a chance to feel that what he threw out was special in that moment. Like, I know a lot of piano players, I've played, I should say, with piano players who they're constantly just throwing out substitutions and throwing out monkey wrenches. Like, it's like, That doesn't seem fun either, right?
No, and I think that comes with maturity and experience and people saying, please stop doing that. And and also it goes back to I love the analogy and of just conversation because it's like I think and that's what I mean by maturity, like to have the patience to let something take its course or to see where something goes, let it following something instead of
Yes.
always dictating, do this, do that, because it's no fun to talk to somebody like that. I'd get tired. I say, okay, I'm done.
Let it happen. That's right. Let it happen and allow them to speak through you. Now, again, it comes with experience, a lot of playing, a lot of practice. Just forget what you practice and just play. Let's just play now.
Well, that reminds me of something Barry Harris told me. He said it's so important to be practicing the right things because what you're practicing will show up in your playing. So, there is a definitely practicing is essential and stuff, but playing is just as essential because that's where you're actually getting there are things you can't get to in the practice room that it
Yes.
have to be learned on the stage. And so one of the things I love when Marcellus says, when there are multiple people playing chords, say a guitarist and a pianist, how would you go about communicating and not cluttering the space behind the soloist?
Mm.
Well, I just turn off the guitarist amp.
See,
I'm sorry.
that ain't right. That ain't right.
I'm just joking.
Well,
Well, look. Sorry, go ahead.
no. Go ahead, Helen.
Well, we don't only have to play chords. Pianists can do double line notes. We can play riffs, and we can, it's like a big party. I love it because I think when I was just starting, I was like, oh, guitarist, okay. Like we would say, okay, well, you play this chorus and then I play that chorus, or you play that, and that's valid too. And I think listening is so key, and learning what to listen for, right? And I mean that's just another layer of skill. It's like I like comping with a guitarist together now, actually, because you're listening to them, and then how can you create this world that complements the whole. It's just, I mean, it comes with a lot of listening, a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, and to be willing to accept that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to step on people's toes, and people get a little sore, or you get sore at them, but that's part of learning, right? And because that's how else will you know?
That's right. And also and listen to people who have used guitar and piano, see how they navigate it. There's a great record called Count Basie 8, the Get Together, and it's an amazing record. You hear Basie, he's on it. It's a small group. It's a 8-piece, and of course Freddie Green is there, and there's other recordings with guitar and piano, and you can hear how it's negotiated.
And I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember. I don't know if there's some great albums with Wes Montgomery and Wynton Kelly playing together. I can't remember the names of them. Right? Maybe Boss Guitar is one of them.
Yeah, Boss Guitar. There's a live. Yeah, I think Ron Carter is on that.
What?
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. So,
I believe.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So, okay. Andy has one more Q&A. How can you try and take the lead in advancing an idea that you want to play within a song? In other words, how can I clearly convey an idea to the entire band? Well, I just love the serendipity that keeps coming out, because that reminds me of something Ron Carter said. Because, that band, that time in jazz was so special. He said they would be playing 6 to 7 nights a week, minimum of 3 sets a night.
Wow.
And they were not playing that many different tunes, like within a given span of time. They were not playing more than 10 tunes. And he said, so you can imagine that there were times where they got sick of each other, or one night, both Herbie and Ron told me the story that Miles told them, don't play the butter notes tonight. And what he meant by that is don't play stuff that feels good, that sounds good. And they said it was such an amazing night because they were forcing themselves to go that precarious route or choose the not so certain outcome. But something Ron has that amazing ability to just that change the whole harmonic vibe, and he said what he did is he would signal stuff by repeating stuff as each chorus, like don't be afraid to repeat stuff. So I would say if you want an idea and you really believe in it and you think it musically, keep doing it at the same time in the form. That shows that you mean it. And Ron did that, and he said that's how they came up with arrangements.
Picking the right notes. And that's live at the half note. It's Wes Montgomery live at the half note.
Oh, okay.
And Paul Chambers is actually on bass. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
My mistake.
Good.
Well, anything that you play, you're conveying an idea. It says how can I try to take lead in advancing an idea? Did you read that?
Yeah, that's okay.
In other words, how can I? Okay, well, anything you play, you're conveying some type of message, and I feel like, Helen mentioned riffs. She mentioned playing the same thing at a specific point in the tune. If that can be effective. That can be effective, particularly bass players. Those root notes, you have all of the control. Like as far as harmony, bass players have it. If it's a C7 chord and you like change the note to a B flat, you've got something completely different now, right?
Yes.
You've got like a sharp 11. Like it gets tricky, and and if that's what you want to throw out there, do it. But you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful and we have to understand our function as individual instrumentalists, but also our function as a rhythm section first before we go stretching out and not playing the butter notes.
I love it. I see Andy back up.
Yeah, I had one quick question maybe before we wrap up. I know, Helen, you talked a lot about how you transcribed comping, and you actually, like we transcribe solos. Jerome, I always struggle as working with young drummers talking about how to listen and develop that ride cymbal sound, in the same way, because it doesn't feel like it's a thing you can sit down and transcribe 3 choruses of Jimmy Cobb's ride cymbal, but how do you approach that, especially with younger drummers just getting started?
Well, what they have to do is they have to practice the ride cymbal alone, just the ride cymbal. You have to single out limbs. I do that to this day. You have to isolate limbs. I got a tip from trumpet player Perez Whitted. He actually works through Lincoln Center as well. I played in his band for years as a very young person, and his dad was a drummer. He said, "Look, put tape under the ride." This was his suggestion: put tape under the ride cymbal, and just play the ride cymbal. Record like that Alamode record, like just play the ride cymbal. Just pump that ride, listen to the bass player, whoever is on the recording. That was Jimmy Merritt, whoever's playing on the recording. Listen to the ride cymbal, listen to the bass player, and just play that ride cymbal. No left hand, no right foot, no left foot. This is very boring, students, but you're gonna see results because you're gonna be able to play. That ride cymbal is something that should not be disrupted and should not be, you shouldn't make it dance, or I should say flavor it up or improvise on it unless you want to break up the ride cymbal. You shouldn't have to. You should be able to play that ride cymbal pattern and play anything with your limbs, whatever you hear, and you shouldn't have to break the ride up. Breaking it up is special, but you shouldn't have to. And you have to practice with the ride, only the ride alone, nothing else. That's how you build that muscle and get the language together of the ride cymbal.
And can I just mention really quickly, transcribing doesn't mean you just write down the notes. It's like you listen to how the note lengths, how they articulate it, how they swing at their rhythm, and playing with the recording, very helpful too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's always a challenge for me as a saxophonist working with young rhythm section players. Of like, I could tell a saxophone player, go learn this solo and this solo and try and understand these licks, but that whole, like, especially the ride cymbal is like a young person say, like, just go sit by yourself and play the rides.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough because nothing that they're listening to outside of jazz recordings is reinforcing what I'm saying, because it's not on the radio anymore. The beat it doesn't really heavily rely on the ride cymbal. But what we're talking about is something that relies heavily on the ride cymbal. They have to understand that this is what the soloist is listening to. This is what piano player, the bass player, this is what they're listening to. And we have to have a sure understanding of what that ride cymbal's function is. You should be able to take a ride cymbal to a gig and only play the ride, and it should be okay.
And I don't know, like listening to Bye Bye Blackbird, I fell in love with Philly Joe's sound, his touch on that ride cymbal. Like, if them imitating, having them imitate something that just sounds so good.
Yeah, touch is important. But I would rather focus on the feel, and you get your touch together. Like someone will. You will be forced to get that touch together at some point. But we got to get that feeling. We got to get that swinging, that good swinging, forward motion happening. We got to get it. Listen to Billy Higgins. Check out, it's an album called Delightful Lee. That's a great one to check out and play to. That ride cymbal is so important.
And something that I think is great, especially now that we can do it with our phones, is just to record yourself when you play and listen back and be very honest with yourself. Like, because, the recorder does not lie.
Unfortunately for us sometimes.
And I want to say one last thing, Andy and Helen. When you all are playing with each other, and there's something that, as a rhythm section, you would like the rhythm section to try to get to on a tune that you've heard at home, share it with your section. Share it with the drummer. If there's something you heard, if you just got hip to Relaxing, Miles Davis recording, and you liked what's happening in the third chorus of Salt Peanuts or whatever they're playing on it, like, talk to your rhythm section and talk to your drummer, and as a rhythm section, be open to that kind of critique. Man, could you check this out, because I like how Philly's playing in two here. I like the way how Al Hayward is playing in two here. Like, I want you all to critique each other in that way, okay? Hip each other to different musics and different ways of playing in the rhythm section. And I think you can have more fun that way. When I said I played in the basement, this is what we were doing all the time, like trying to sound just like these records, these rhythm section in records.
So yeah, listening to, if we can't play together right now as much, listening to music together, that's super fun, like we just did today.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I want to thank you both. I want to thank all the attendees and all the great questions we had tonight. Really appreciate it.